What if all of life came to you with ease and joy and glory? What if that which you've always imagined possible actually is? What if it was possible to create a life you're excited to get out of bed for? Welcome to Creating Beyond podcast. I'm Ashley Rose, here to introduce you to the tools you can use to create the life you've always dreamed of. Is it time for you to step into everything you came here to be? So welcome everybody to another episode of Creating Beyond podcast. I have the amazing Yasadara with me today, another fellow Access Consciousness Certified Facilitator who I haven't had on this podcast before, so I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And we haven't really had many conversations before, if any, so I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Indeed, we have seen each other finally. But yeah, what conversation can we have to bring different perspectives to the world and to voices?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to start with asking you how you actually got into using these tools of access consciousness, because those of you listening, some of you use the tools a lot, some of you might be completely new to the tools of access consciousness, but how does that look like for you? When did you get into it?
Well, I got into it through a friend. I used to be a singer for 15 years and a professional performer. And then I think since the moment I got into art university, I started having all these issues with my voice. Till the point where I lost my voice during my first year, which created a lot of judgment and a lot of stuff. But I kind of moved over it, but it always kept being that struggle where I would be on really big stages and sometimes my body would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And there was no formula for it. There was no real trust. So it kept me seeking. And I remember one day I was on a holiday and I remember either I'm going to really start to choose into something, look into different things, which now I realize choose to really commit to seeing if I want to do this being a singer or not. And so I ended up in Copenhagen in this special technique university, studying for 3 years, becoming one of their specialist teachers. And so after that, enrolling into being one of these technique teachers, working with many singers, many actors, and being bored, but also knowing that that was part of the way, but there had to be something else, and I had just no clue what that was.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and so I remember one day just sitting at home, I had everything I desired. Still my voice was not something I could for 100% rely on. And so I just started questioning, okay, so what is next? Do I want to deliver babies? Do I want to be a voice specialist, in the speaking, voice pathologist? And everything I looked at, going back to university, I was ooh, putting myself back into the system while I'm already this far with teaching myself. I think it's going to be hell for the people that are going to have to teach me, but also for myself. So I literally just sat in my living room and asked, okay, so what else is there that I don't know? And that's how Access came about.
Wow, that's so cool. And when was that? How many years ago?
That must have been around 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah.
Amazing. And we having mentioned we've just met, we also just met, and I've just done a podcast with Julia Sotis, and we were talking about meeting at the castle, and it was my first time ever leaving Australia to attend any access consciousness classes.
Wow.
I become a certified facilitator kind of just before COVID and all the craziness started, and Australia was pretty hardcore with not letting anyone in and out. And so you've also facilitated the Right Voice for You classes for I know a little while now, and I really would love to speak to that as well, because again, with Julie and I's conversation, it's such a fascinating topic for me, and it's something that so many of us keep ourselves from actually choosing, having our voice in the world, showing up in the world.
And just that whole conversation about actually being visible, because there's so much stuff that comes up for us and so many judgments we have that we're not actually truly willing to receive. So, can you speak to like what is right voice for you? Because
Oh gosh.
I think people are still confused.
Yeah. Well, for me, I tend to describe it, it's like living these tools. It's like the class that makes you live all the access consciousness tools. And what I've seen people stepping into through doing these 3-day classes, or even already intros and 1-day classes, was that there was this connection with them and with their bodies and with every part of their life starting to open up that they had very often already closed off as a very little like child at the age of like before 6 often, where this connection to everything, this receiving from everything, this having no judgment and just doing everything for the joy. For a lot of people it gets cut because like you get judged, or like, you know, it doesn't fit into your family, or like it's not something that's appropriate. And so we start to mold ourselves in all of these boxes where we get to know the rules but never get to be us. And what I've seen in these classes is that it starts to melt all these boxes and all these rules, and people start to discover how much freedom there is into being them, and how much capacities there is in being them. And no matter if somebody judges you or put rules on you, just being present and be like, hey, I don't have to fight any of this. I don't have to defend any of this. I don't have to avoid any of this. This is where you function from, and you can be you and I can be me.
Mm, that's so beautiful. And I've definitely had a similar experience with it. And for me, really, it's given me. Like, and I mean, you know, I don't have all of me. And like when we talk about me, like there's like we can't be defined. Like it's so interesting talking about like being us. And I'm still like, what is being us? Because being us is being everything and anything simultaneously. And that whole idea about like literally allowing yourself to show up and having your voice, no matter who judges you, what anyone else thinks, what anyone else expects you to be like, look like, is such freedom. And I think we tend to forget, like, with this whole idea about like having our voice in the world, that like we are a crucial part in the world. And like without us like truly actually showing up and like allowing ourselves out in the world, like we are literally depriving the world of us, but not even us, just like parts of the world that like are so delicious.
That, yeah, I love how you say that. That's literally like, if you're not gonna like show up and be you, like no one else is gonna do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
facilitated like finished facilitating a talk to the entities class this weekend, and like there is a section in the manual, and I don't exactly remember what it says, but basically like no one else can be you. Like, so you've got to actually show up as you and actually become that component of the world that begins to change the world, but no one else can choose to be that. So that is this like there's so much freedom in it. And like you said, so often growing up, it's like, you know, you're allowed to be this, but you can't be this. Don't be too much, like, you know, don't have too much joy. And these are all the places that we totally suppress ourselves into fitting ourselves into the expectations of our parents, or the projections of our parents, or the judgments of, you know, society and family.
School,
So,
teachers.
yeah.
And rather than, because there's this interesting part, what I've seen also with people then thinking they're like, once they think they have their voice, it starts to become this opposite pole of like, I've been hiding so long, so now I'm going to do totally the opposite. And then what I've seen with Right Voice for You and with using these tools, that people start to discover, oh, I can totally use this chameleon effects that I've been like using against me my whole life, where I tried to fit in everywhere, as a way of creating without giving myself up. And I think that's the freedom where having our voice is so different with these tools, because it's not about like proving your point of view. It's not about like putting your point of view on the table. But for me, it's often like this willingness to listen. Are you willing to listen to what can be heard? Are you willing to deliver to what like to what's going to create a greater possibility without giving up your knowing? And
Mm,
that I've seen that change like marriages, I've seen that change like businesses, I've seen that change like how people walk in the world. And that's, I think, one of the greatest places where if you learn how to be with people in your life without excluding yourself, with always including yourself,
Mhm.
there will be totally different like pathways opening up
Mm.
for being and creating anything.
Can you speak to, like, is there an example you have about that, or something like just like one place or space that has like changed your world? Because I've been having conversations with people lately, and I've had a few people say, like, basically, like, how do I deal with difficult people? And again, this is like a conversation about like literally you being willing to have your voice and it actually including you in the computation.
Yeah. And like for me, it also has been like, are you willing to have people thinking that you're mean or bad or that you're wrong without buying that point of view, but like still acknowledging, like, I totally get that I'm wrong right now and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna like fit into that wrongness and make myself smaller anymore. But I'm totally gonna allow you to make me wrong and to think I'm wrong and to have that moment without stopping myself. And I think that's one of the like still today, I think it's like something that I'm still learning, I'm getting better at, but it's that receiving everything. Because if you're gonna start to have like your greatness, if you're going to have your greatness in business and you're really going to like start sticking out, creating things that people don't, no matter if it's like in relationships or in your business or with parenting, no matter what area, with money, there will be people that start showing up in your life that will not agree with you, that will make you wrong.
Mm.
And I think that's where our success lies, when we're truly willing to start looking at, okay, so wow, this is harsh on me now. How can I change my willingness to receive this
Mm.
without like making that real and true? And
Yeah.
that's where vulnerability kicks in, where you can be with yourself and be like, oh, this one is not easy for me to receive. What will it
Mm-hmm.
take for that to change? Because as long as you're not willing to receive everything, like you'll not be able to have everything. And that's one
Yeah.
of the things that I think has been in the last few years really something big for myself.
Yeah. Oh, me too. And it's like an ever expanding conversation. It's that whole thing about you cannot receive that which you're not willing to be. You cannot be that which you're not willing to receive. And on my last episode, like I spoke to, something that showed up. An old work colleague when I was a professional nurse has kind of messaged someone and said all this stuff about me. And it really like, it shocked me. Like I didn't expect that there was people in the world that saw me that way with such like meanness and unkindness. And I was like, wow, like I've never, my whole existence is about like contributing to changing the world. And it was so interesting like having that, because I've heard so many people say like the more successful you become, the more haters you're going to get, basically. And you kind of see that with everyone in the world, basically, that's creating something different. There's a large portion of people that make up a lot of stuff and have a lot of points of view. And that whole thing about like, are you willing to be it? And I've just like, well, it actually come up in the Talk TNTs class I facilitated, and I said, when this kind of stuff comes up, like it's so interesting because the only thing you'll usually resist and react to is that which the judgments that match the point of view you have of yourself.
Hmm.
And it was such a gift, because as much as like there was just this like total like intensity in my world and just like, oh my God, I just want to die in a hole right now. Like I was like,
Yes,
no,
that.
what questions can I ask here? And I started looking at, okay, cool. So have I decided that her judgment of me is actually real and true? And there was somewhere that her judgment of me and all the things that she said matched the judgments and the points of view I had of myself that I wasn't even totally aware of. And she had kind of mentioned that, I'm just doing this for the money and I'm preying on the vulnerable and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't recognize, because it wasn't cognitive, but when I started asking questions, I was like, wow, somewhere I've decided that I'm just doing this for the money. And it has come up before. And that point of view has come up with most people I've worked with as well. And I noticed there was still something there. So it's like, also with that whole idea about having your voice in the world, it's like, if you're truly willing to look at that, you don't have to get it right. You don't have to be like, oh, nothing bothers me, because again, that's not vulnerability. Like that doesn't really change it. But you're willing to go, cool, where have I, like, what point of view is this validating that I have of me here? And that place that I got to then actually began to like melt that resistance, melt that reaction, not anywhere I was agreeing or aligning with her and going, okay, what inspiration am I to the world that I haven't actually acknowledged? And for me, like that's right voice for you.
Yeah. Well, also, I love how you then, like, if you start to question whatever is underneath, also, without making it significant, that where you'll get also like the truth of that. Because I think like a lot of us have been like looking for our values to what we did and what we didn't, and that made you a good person or a bad person, but we have not been acknowledged. What I see a lot in these classes showing up is that people like often get acknowledged for the gift they are for the first time, and so that starts to unravel and change everything, even to the point where like I did a class this weekend, and it was so amazing because one person like at a certain point day two said like, wow, it's so interesting, I have this reflex to like hide my body, so literally like putting a pillow on the belly, and but it makes no more sense anymore after yesterday. So for the first
Um,
time in its entirety of their life, they were like, it makes no more sense to hide my body. This is so funny. It's the first time that I actually feel really good in my body, no matter how it looks like.
yeah, wow. That's awesome. That's it never shows up the way you think it's going to.
Exactly. And what if that's the gift we can choose to have, is to start feeling good in like any area of our life, no matter what's going on right now, no matter if you
Yeah.
mess things up, no matter if things are not working out as you hoped they would or as you were supposed to create them. You could start to actually have gratitude for yourself and not having to beat yourself up
Mm.
into having a different choice.
Yeah, totally. And I like, I mean, these classes are so based on like those, the five elements of intimacy and access, which is the honor, trust, allowance, gratitude, and vulnerability. And I mean, they're like my favorite go-to tools to really change anything. And I love like in the classes I've done with Chris Hughes, who's like I guess he's kind of the facilitator of the facilitators of these classes. And like it's so cool because in the classes he's like, and what if you're not wrong? And so what? So what you chose out, like, but what if you're still not wrong? And that's something that I always come back to, like with everything, because with this particular situation, like my automatic response was like, was it something I posted? Was it something I said? It must have. And so it's so interesting how what we will start to do is we'll start like going to this automatic response of like, what did I do? And then how can I stop myself from doing that again to make everyone like me and to fit into this box, which is how we lose our voice in the first place. And because if I wasn't willing to truly be everything I've been choosing to be since quitting my nursing job and doing this, like there'd be a lot less people that had access to these tools. But it's so easy to not acknowledge that and go straight to, what have I done wrong? It must have been something that I did. And so I noticed myself started like molding myself into like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't show up like this. And maybe it was this photo and maybe, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm actually being insane right now because
Yes.
all that's happening is I'm now losing me. And it's so interesting. I could so clearly see these two pathways of like me continuing down that road and then just being like, all right, I'm just going to give up totally. I might as well not do this. Like I might as well just get a nursing job again, which can happen so quickly when our brains like kick in. And this other pathway of like, wait a second, like what greatness am I now choosing and stepping into, and what potency am I choosing that's actually creating this
Shows
reaction,
up.
judgments, like points of view in the world. And I was like, and how much fun can I actually have with that? Like, how much fun can I have inspiring the seers and the seekers and the choosers of the world to something different and being a leader of that? And then how much fun can I have with everyone else that judges the hell out of me for choosing what I'm choosing because it doesn't fit what they've decided it should? And how does it get any better?
I love this. Well, it's interesting because I had a conversation like this week also here with somebody, and I just like we were having lunch, and the first thing the person said like, "Oh, I was like an MD and I stopped." And I looked at her and I didn't know that person. I just looked at her and I was like, "Yeah, but don't give up your title." And she looked at me and she was like, she was totally like planning on throwing everything overboard because she was done with it, and I was like, "Please don't. Like, what can you use it for that will allow you to have particular entrance points?" And that's also something I've seen, that like how much we give up on everything we've been creating in the past rather than using all these like titles or licenses as not as a significance or as what we are, but as the keys to entry and open doors that
Absolutely.
other people might not. And it was so funny to have her look and be like, oh, wow, I actually never thought I could use that title to my advantage. I've
Mm,
only been using it to fit in. But
mm,
like having that as a key to opening doors was something totally different. And that's what if we could start using all the titles, all the things that we have acquired in the box called this reality to start to create the invitation for
mm.
people that are looking for something different but will not necessarily find it
Yeah.
unless we also allow our voice as a nurse or as a teacher or as a singer.
Mhm.
It's something I've been hiding a long time too, that I used to be
Yeah.
a singer.
Yeah.
And then I decided, okay, I'm going to stop singing because it's not fun for me anymore.
Yeah.
Rather than also looking at how I can utilize that energy to invite people to have their voice, not as a singer necessarily, but just to like invite them.
Yeah. And I've had multiple people actually choose classes with me and mention it to me and said, I chose this because you're a nurse. I'm also a nurse. So I'd love to quit nursing. And because you've quit nursing and now you're, helping people, empowering people, like I got that was a possibility for me too. So I've really like, sometimes I'll speak about it and then sometimes I won't, but I really recognize like how, again, all of us having our different voices in the world, and the voices in the world are literally also like, what you choose to create. Like it's your physical body has its own voice, like you have your verbal voice, you have an energetic voice of just like your presence and what that creates when you walk into a space. So really it's like so interesting that if again you can kind of start to see if we're all not willing to have our voice, then there's so many people that aren't introduced to, if we're speaking about access consciousness tools, that wouldn't be able to find these tools if we weren't actually willing to truly have our voice and show up as us, because we invite certain people that wouldn't be invited by others or would miss, or they wouldn't even know of that possibility. And I think that's been such a gift for me to recognize, like, wait a second, what gift am I and who and what am I inviting people to that I haven't acknowledged? And that was the conversation that Julia and I had, because I was like, up until recently, and there's still like little threads there. I'm like, oh, I don't want to just like constantly show up on social media because I don't want to be another like noise. People know these tools. I don't want to be speaking the same shit that everyone else is speaking. And then I really started getting, wow, like what am I avoiding and defending with that point of view? And started actually asking the universe to like just show me what else is actually available. And I've started having people recently be like, oh my god, you said the things that I've always known, but I get it now just because of the way that you explained it, or the example that you gave. And that's really what Right Voice has been for me as well, like allowing me to have more of me.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
and to share that with the world.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, and that's like if we never had to give up any part and piece of us, like what would be possible? Like if yeah, if that was truly like if you could start to have gratitude for every choice you've ever made in your life, even the ones you think that are the worst,
Yeah.
and start to ask like I wonder what was right about that and how I can use that to create a different future on the planet, which I think Red Voice is very much about. It's really about stepping into having your voice, so we start to create, or you start to create the future that you're aware of can be. And
Mm.
yeah,
Absolutely. And like, I think I was just thinking of tools. I'm like, number one go-to tool is like, what if you're not wrong and you're still not wrong and you're still not wrong? Like, I'm like literally reminding yourself of that. Like when anything shows up, when anywhere where you're truly starting to be and have more of you, and then someone says something or someone judges you, or, a friend decides that they don't want to be friends with you anymore. Like, again, it's like, what if you've never been wrong? Like truly. And I was messaging, a lady that just did foundation with me recently, and she was just pinging. So I just messaged her. I was like, you just popped into my awareness. Like, how are you? And she's like, oh, today I'm not having a good day. Like, basically I'm kind of giving myself up for this man, and people aren't signing up for this class that I'm doing, and, all this stuff. And I went,
wrong,
so she
wrong, wrong,
started
wrong.
judging herself. And it was just like, all this energy of like wrongness, which I'm sure all of you listening know exactly what that is. And I said that my message was just like, but what if you're not wrong? Like, what if that's not wrong? Like, truly, none of those choices. What if none of those choices are wrong? And like, what else can you choose? And just that, like, totally melted her world. And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, I'm going to go get my foundation manual. And I said, just open to a page, just ask it what's required. And just that, like, you're not wrong for anything you have ever chosen. Anywhere you're at, anywhere you're not at that you've decided you should be at, or your family have decided you should be at. It's like, because again, when we have that space of allowance for us, then and only then can true choice exist. Then and only then can we actually begin to truly expand the creative base of our life, which Right Voice for You used to be called. So it really, everything starts with us. Like, and yeah, so what if you guys listening are not wrong? And as Yasso said, like, what's right about this that I'm not getting? What's right about me that I'm not getting? And truly, like, what gift am I in the world, and what inspiration am I in the world that I've never been acknowledged before, like that I've never acknowledged before? And then, like, what validation am I seeking outside of me that if I no longer seeked would allow me to acknowledge the gift that I actually be?
Yeah. And that's the thing also I've seen, like, we will not always know for who we are being an inspiration. So the less you expect people to actually come and tell you, and you just keep creating, like, sometimes people will come after 5-6 years and actually tell you, like, hey, that one post or that one line that you said, I'm still using it every day. And it changed everything. And so what if we could start to be aware of, like, the choice to never stop will create the breadth of life we can be, where others can also have this different possibility.
Yeah, boom, absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful for you, and to have the first kind of conversation, I guess, ever, which is really cool. Come on, that's what I kind of do with people. Come on my podcast, let's have a conversation.
Next time we'll do live with some wine and coffees.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I had a wine actually, like during I think the first night of Talk to the Entities, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't usually drink, and I hadn't drank actually since the Right Voice for You training, one glass, and I'm like, I am good. Like, I am very happy, even more happy than I usually am. Amazing, darling. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you guys for listening. And will you let people know where they can find you? You're amazing. You travel all around the world, do all different classes. Yes. We've got lots of things going on. So where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me as any other, like, Access facilitator on the accessconsciousness.com website. I also have my own website where most of our events are on, and that's just my full name, so YasodaraRomeroFernandez.com. And of course on Facebook, Instagram, social media, YouTube. I'm there everywhere with my name. I think there's just one of these. So yeah.
There's one of my name too, but I've Ashley Rose is actually my first and middle name. I don't like use my last name, but when I do, there's actually only one of me. So I'm like, maybe I should use that to my advantage, actually. Yeah. Awesome. And I'll pop the link to all of that in the show notes below as well for you guys to just, for ease, to go click on. So stuff. And you're a Talk to the Entities facilitator, a relationship done different. No, not a relationship. Right Voice for You facilitator.
Business on different, conscious horse, conscious rider, and a 3-day body class facilitator, and X-Men 1 day.
Oh my God. All of the things. How did it get better?
A lot.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, darling.
Bye.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen into this episode and my show. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if it has been a contribution to you, please leave a 5-star review, subscribe to my show, and share this episode with anyone you know that may be looking to create their life as something greater. You can find more about me at Ashley, ASHLEE-rose.com, and you can find more information about the tools of Access Consciousness at accessconsciousness.com.